From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
It's summer road trip season, but what this couple is doing is about so much more than seeing the scenery.
Carol said, what would we do with the money? And I said, well, this might be a good place to put it.
Why they're hitting the road in a tractor. Fertilizer prices are finally starting to drop, but should you be locking in prices now ahead of next season? As a large portion of the country bakes under high heat, and some say it couldn't come at a worse time for crops.
And I could not play this out any worse, I think, in my mind of how this heat wave is playing out now.
And it may just be the start right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Happening right now, scorching triple-digit heat is hitting the heartland, with forecasters predicting dozens of high-temperature records that may be broken throughout the week. What has already been a hot couple of weeks impacting crop conditions. Check out the latest crop conditions report. At 64% of the corn crop now rated good to excellent, the same as last week, but silking running behind with 37% of the crop now in the silking stage. The 5-year average is 48%. Soybeans now 61% good to excellent, down 1% from last week. 48% of that crop is blooming, 7% behind the 5-year average. And winter wheat harvest now at 70%, just 1% behind the 5-year average. The historic heat wave baking the West, pushing temps to fresh records over the weekend. Glasgow, Montana, reaching 108 degrees Sunday. It was 100 degrees in Lawton, Oklahoma. And look at what could be ahead this weekend for the Western Corn Belt. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey calling it disastrously timed, spreading out of the Great Plains and into the Midwest just as corn is starting to pollinate.
We're looking at late week to weekend temperatures that are going to hit 100 degrees or higher in many of the southwestern Corn Belt states, including Nebraska, Kansas, and into Missouri, and even parts of Iowa, especially the southern and western parts of the state. And given the timing on that and the fact that a disproportionate amount of that crop is moving into pollination or blooming in this mid to late July period, I don't think we could write a worse scenario for the crop. Unfortunately, a complicating impact here is that we're not going to get much nighttime relief. Temperatures at night are going to be in the 70s to near 80 degrees, and that adds another layer of complexity to this entire pollination and blooming situation that could be detrimental to the crop.
Now, Rippey says the bit of good news is the majority of the eastern Corn Belt is expected to escape the heat this week, but longer term, the heat is expected to stick around into August, according to the latest National Weather Service outlook. So there's a lot for our weather team to track this week. Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire joins us. And Andrew, there's also the chance for some severe weather.
And eventually that severe weather is going to help break some of the heat. But as you take a look at the map behind me, you can really see where that heat dome is really centered. Check out Dallas, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It could be nearing that 110-degree mark later on today for the actual air temperature. And of course, there are some heat alerts into effect this Tuesday as well. We've got heat advisories up towards Kansas, down towards San Antonio. Meanwhile, an excessive heat warning down for Dallas and much of Oklahoma, where the heat index value, that feel-like temperature, is going to be around 105 to 115 degrees. And even a heat advisory as far north as the Twin Cities for this Tuesday, with heat index values anywhere from 95 to near that triple-digit heat mark. Coming up in Ag Day weather, we're going to continue to watch that heat wave that's going to continue for the southern plains and much of the Great Lakes and Midwestern states. There's also going to be a few severe storms across the upper Midwest today, and along that front, that will eventually bring some relief to parts of the upper plain states as well as parts of the upper Midwest from that significant heat. And then we are continuing to watch some flooding potential across the Ohio River Valley and across the northeastern states as we go throughout this week. Check out this spectacular scene captured on camera by Carol Bauer, but a beautiful summer sunset in Graceville, Minnesota over the weekend. You can just take a look at this all day long. I'll have your Ag Day forecast coming up.
We're not the only ones dealing with a heat wave. High heat is also hitting portions of the European Union. Now, parts of England are dealing with temperatures reaching 104 degrees, potentially the hottest on record. The impact also being felt in Spain, Italy, and Portugal, where crews are also battling wildfires in that high heat. Prolonged triple digits are hurting the wheat crop in France. The European Union, which produces almost 18% of the world's wheat, has cut its estimate for the soft wheat crop by roughly 5 million tons from an earlier prediction. After hitting record highs this spring, fertilizer prices are starting to cool. What does that mean for farmers for the rest of this season and heading into 2023? AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us with details.
Clinton, prices for major fertilizer products have dropped substantially from the March records as demand for product has started to pull back. However, the big question is whether or not prices will continue to fall, and is it time for farmers to be locking in some of these prices for the 2023 season. Compared to March, urea prices in the NOLA or New Orleans, Louisiana market topped out at $935 per ton and are currently in the lower $500 range. Phosphate is down from $1,000 to between $750 to $800 per ton, while potash has dropped $150 to $200 from its highs. So will those trends continue? One fertilizer expert says it's very hard to predict because of the geopolitical unknowns.
And the problem is, for each one of the major ones, nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, there are major global factors at play that even if it was fundamental, it'd be hard enough to call on its own. But a lot of these factors are government driven, or they're products outside the realm of the fertilizer world.
He says the 2022 fertilizer market is also setting up similar to 2008 when prices fell in conjunction with corn prices, as shown on this graph.
And of course, as we remember, the prices went up and then gradually started to drop off. And this year, it is extremely close.
So the big question is, should farmers lock in some of these fertilizer prices, and do you lock in grain prices at the same time? Linville says they're advising hitting singles, not home runs.
We need to be looking for opportunities where we can lock in our inputs, whether that be fertilizer, whether that be chemical, whether that be seed, and sell some grain against it. If that relationship, we look at it and we say, yes, I can be profitable with these type of numbers, then it's worth putting in a layer.
Fertilizer price trends still ride on the war and whether Russia will be able to supply natural gas to Europe for nitrogen production, and if Lithuania allows Belarus to export potash. Plus, China is resuming phosphate exports, but Linville says the time frame is still unknown. Now, Linville says an additional wild card for the market is if the world is moving into recession. That can lower demand for grains and fertilizer. That could also dampen prices.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Fertilizer is often moved by rail, and in this country, and for now, it will continue to move as a potential rail strike on Monday was averted. President Biden last week signing an executive order to create a presidential emergency board. Now, that board will work to keep the collective bargaining process on track, as well as keep the railways operating. If he hadn't appointed the emergency board, union employees voted last week to go on strike Monday. The board now has 30 days to make settlement recommendations. All this comes after the contract for 13 rail worker unions expired back in 2019. The two sides failing last month to reach an agreement. The big issues: wages and benefits. The high heat, a big factor when it comes to markets this week. We'll break down the latest numbers coming up next. And later, a summer road trip involving a tractor, a trek thousands of miles, and a couple with a big heart in the country.
Ag Day is brought to you by the End Zone by Farm Shop MFG, which allows you to rehydrate your soybeans from 10 to 13%. On a 20,000 bushel bin, that's an extra semi-load added to your bottom line. Order your End Zone fan control by July 31st and receive $200 off.
Bayer and BASF have won a new trial over a case of dicamba drift. The case involves a Missouri peach farmer. Now, the farmer had claimed the herbicide produced by the two companies drifted onto his orchard and harmed his crops. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals finding a federal jury was wrongly told to assess punitive damages for the companies together rather than separately. It said a new trial was needed to determine those punitive damages for each company. The order does not affect the jury's verdict that said the companies were responsible. The high heat is helping to boost prices right now. Michelle Rook joins us again with more on the market rally to start the week.
Joining us with market analysis, Ted Seifert, Zaner Ag Hedge, and a risk-on day on Monday in both grain and livestock futures. Ted, grain's nice to see them close higher. And how much farther do you think we can push this, since weather was kind of one of the main factors?
Yeah, absolutely. We are trading the weather. See, that's the thing. When we are going down in when we had been going down in the inflation off sort of climate that we were in for a couple of weeks, technicals, fundamentals, none of that really mattered. Now, today had a much different feel to it. There is some buying coming back in from these, funds and things like that, but it really allows us to trade weather. It allows us to trade grain fundamentals, which a lot of people are going to argue that prices have gotten well too low and that we're due for a bit of a bounce. And so we saw a bit of that. Corn didn't act all that well. We got December corn back over the 200-day moving average, but we really couldn't close anywhere near it, well below it. Soybeans and wheat held on to more of the strength. So we'll see if we're able to follow through. We'll see if this risk on, this inflation back on climate is able to last, or if this is just a one-day bounce. Yeah. I will say that the crude oil chart was probably the most impressive thing that you had on the board there on Monday. So maybe that's suggesting that there might be multiple more days of this, and that we aren't quite as worried about a global recession and inflation really cratering and bubble burst, things like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we follow this up. It's nice to be able to kind of trade grain fundamentals and talk about weather again. Hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, and like you said, outside markets helped crude oil higher, the dollar index lower, but talk about technical objectives. What are you seeing in this market resistance areas that we need to get over here to keep going?
Yeah, we really need to get over that 620 level in the December corn to get above that 200-day moving average again. That 200-day moving average is super important because it's the long-term trend line. If we can get back above that, we can say that we're back out of this bear market territory in corn, and that would be really nice. So that's 620. Yeah, ultimately in beans, the $14 mark is certainly a psychological level. 1380 is the bigger one. That's where that 200-day moving average is there. Grains need to get up and close and stay above those 200-day moving averages so we can start to feel like that was a bigger correction rather than an overall change in the trend.
All right, some things to watch for. Thanks so much for your analysis, and we have more analysis at agweb.com, but thanks for joining us, Ted Seifert, Senior Ag Hedge. More AgDay coming up.
For professional marketing advice specifically tailored to your needs, call Zaner Ag Hedge at 312-277-0113. Find farm equipment on Machinery Pete's July 19th online auction. No reserve, no buyer fees. Start bidding now at auctions.machinerypete.com.
Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire joining us here with our national forecast. And Andrew, we got quite a bit of rain if you look across the Midwest, really through last Friday, and now it's going to get hot and steamy.
Unfortunately, and places like downstate southern Indiana, they really haven't had much moisture all summer long. They really picked up a beneficial amount of rain, but as you mentioned, we're going to heat things up and dry things out very quickly once again. But nonetheless, again, it was some very beneficial rain across parts of the Midwest, downstates of the Great Lakes region here as we have gone through this weekend. And again, we are going to heat things up and begin to dry things out once again, looking at more at that temperature for this afternoon. Again, notice that triple-digit heat mark from basically Kansas all the way down towards Texas. And as we go into tomorrow as well for Wednesday's forecast, we're going to continue to see that heat building on a little bit further off towards the east with more 90s. In fact, we could be looking at a few triple-digit heat marks as far north as St. Louis over towards the Cincinnati away as we go on into midweek. There is also a chance of some stronger storms to develop along a weak cold front that'll at least bring some temporary relief to the heat, especially for the second half, northern half of the plains, as well as the upper portions of the Midwest on Tuesday. And then as we head on into Wednesday, we'll likely see some of that severe weather threat trying to work its way a little bit further off towards the south and east across parts of the Ohio River Valley. Looking at a rainfall estimate as we go throughout this entire week, again, where you see these greens and yellows, that's where some heavier downpours will likely be associated with some scattered showers and thunderstorms. The upper portions of the Midwest, as well as the Ohio River Valley up to the New England coastline. That is going to be the area to watch for a few pockets of some localized flooding along with some of those showers and thunderstorms. Walking through the future radar as we go throughout this Tuesday, again, there's that low pressure system along that cold front, and that's where we'll be watching at least the potential here for at least a few scattered stronger storms to bubble on up across the northern plains, the upper portions of the Midwest. Meanwhile, there's the heat dome that's going to continue to expand across parts of the deep south and parts of the Midwestern states as we go throughout the midweek's forecast. And again, that's going to bring with it some very intense heat for parts of the lower 48 as we go throughout midweek, and there's more where that comes from into next weekend. Let's take a look at a few select cities a little closer at home. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, mostly sunny and warm, high 86 degrees. Going over to Corning, Iowa, hot and breezy, high 95. And even into Oregon, it's hot as well, 92 degrees.
Milk cows need a lot of rest, but would they rather eat or sleep? A new study offers up some interesting details next. And later, on a mission, how a couple and a tractor are about to undertake a massive road trip, all for a good cause.
Registration is open for the 2022 Pro Farmer Crop Tour. Join our team as we gain insight on the 2022 growing season in person or online. Visit profarmercroptour.com/register to select the stop nearest you.
Cows will pick resting over eating. Now that's according to a new study from the University of California, Davis. In this study, cows stood for 4 hours, then they were fed. A control group didn't have to stand, but was fed at the same time. The researchers found that cows that had been standing prior to feeding ate for an average of 29 minutes, while the ones who didn't have to stand ate for an average of 95 minutes. And another study they did found cows will choose to rest even in less than ideal conditions. The researchers say, based on the studies, it's best to avoid forcing cows to stand for more than 3 hours and aim for at least 10 to 12 hours of rest per cow per day, and always strive for comfortable resting areas. Now, the White House on Monday announced the 17th Operation Fly Formula mission. The effort started earlier this year in order to speed up the import of infant formula following a massive shortage. The announcement comes on the heels of the House passing new legislation aimed at making baby formula cheaper. The Formula Act would suspend tariffs on imported formula through the end of the year. Right now, formula that comes from countries without free trade agreements are subject to tariffs that increase their price tag by about 27%. It now moves to the Senate for consideration. The U.S. is still in a baby formula shortage that was compounded when a major plant in Michigan shut down for months earlier this year. The plant has since reopened. Coming up, a summer road trip unlike any other. Why this couple is getting ready to hop on their tractor and travel from Nebraska to Alaska, next in the country.
Registration is open for the 2022 Pro Farmer Crop Tour. Join our team as we gain insight on the 2022 growing season in person or online. Visit profarmercroptour.com/register to select the stop nearest you.
Driving 3,000 miles in 60 days isn't a quick trip, but for one couple, it's about much more than the trip. Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan tells us why they're traveling from Nebraska to Alaska on a tractor.
Total 3,910.
That's how many miles they plan to travel in this.
The tractor itself was about $3,500.
Over 5 months, Dick and others fixed up this tractor that they named Aggie.
We adapted a cab from an Ellis Chalmers XT170.
Tractors are hard to find and expensive, so they bought one here and are driving it to Alaska with no AC and a max speed of 20 miles per hour. They'll stop at Case IH dealerships along the way, all in an effort to raise money.
Carol said, what would we do with the money? And I said, well, this might be a good place to put it.
The Oritas are raising money for the Colorado Children's Hospital Foundation, a hospital that saved Dick's daughter's life 58 years ago this week.
But she just refused to eat. And after the doctors here had spent 3 days trying to figure something out, they told us, put her in the car and go to Denver. Don't stop or anything, just go to Denver.
And so Dick and his late wife did just that.
We dropped her off, dying.
But the Denver Children's Hospital did something Dick will never forget.
We owe the hospital a lot. And this is kind of a way to help pay that back.
With a goal of raising $100,000, passion and purpose is what's driving this tractor trip for kids.
There's so many kids out there that that need the resources and the research that Children's Hospital does.
All right, thanks, Ty. Now, if you'd like to follow their trip, you can follow along at tractortrip.com. And that's all the time we have this morning. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day out in Farm Country.